And joining us now from Los Angeles with more on the growing electronic waste phenomenon is Armand Sadeghi, founder and CEO of All Green Electronics Recycling. Armand, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
So e-waste or electronic waste, as we said, consists of everything from old TVs, cell phones, air conditioners, refrigerators, and many of these gadgets initially manufactured in China. And much of this electronic junk actually returns to China. As we mentioned, the UN says about 70% of electronic waste globally ends up in China. How does it end up in China and why?
Well, electronic waste, which includes just about anything that plugs in or takes a battery, is full of commodities that are very valuable, including gold, platinum, silver, and other valuable commodities. But it also contains things like lead and mercury. And so as individuals and companies recycle this equipment or give it to a so-called recycler, their expectation is that it's going to be recycled. But in many cases, the highest bidders for this product are companies in China that are able to simply dump the hazardous material while still recovering the valuable commodities and precious metals.
So companies in China actually pay to get the e-waste sent over to them?
Indeed, they do, because unlike processing, for example, in California, where there are strict laws about where certain things that contain lead and mercury can go, in many parts of China, they're able to simply dump that toxic waste into rivers, landfills, and in some cases, just neighborhoods.
But this is in contradiction to some international laws. It's in violation that developed countries ship all this waste to developing ones. Why is this happening? And what happens to the waste once it arrives in some of these developed nations other than in China? Are they all recycling it, or does some just sit there in landfills?
Well, first of all, as this equipment is shipped off to many different places, sometimes it's disguised as equipment that can potentially be reused. And it's in large shipping containers that are very hard to track. Although there are some nonprofit groups who are now tracking these shipments and identifying the companies that are not doing it the right way. But often it's disguised as goods that are going to be refurbished or reused, and that is unfortunately rarely the case when it comes to these old gadgets.
Now, the U.S. is the only industrialized country that refuses to ratify the Basel Convention, which is that international treaty designed to regulate the export of hazardous waste to developing nations. What are the consequences of the U.S. refusing to do this?
Well, you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, the U.S. has not ratified the Basel Convention, and what that means is that there are no domestic laws that prohibit e-waste from being shipped off to developing nations. And what that essentially means is that e-waste can be put into containers from the U.S., shipped off to a place like China or parts of Africa, and unfortunately dumped without any consequence for the companies that are doing that. Although there are international laws, there are none domestically that stop most e-waste from being shipped off.
Armand, how dangerous is this waste? What are the toxins that it emits?
Oh, they're extremely dangerous. And there have been several studies done recently that have shown levels of lead in the blood of children in several regions in China. Especially Guiyu, where it was shown that they had extremely high, elevated levels of lead. But it doesn't stop there. I mean, there's so much more. But lead and mercury are the two that there's the most of, because everything that has a screen, whether it's an old CRT tube TV, contains lead. And the new devices, the laptops, cell phones, flat screen televisions, and monitors, they all contain mercury tubes. And that is extremely toxic, especially when it enters the waterways and land.
So in your opinion, very quickly, who should be paying for the proper disposal of this material? Should it be the companies that make it, a tax levied on the consumers that buy it, or perhaps government or NGOs?
Well, I mean, we're seeing both models throughout the United States work where they're done correctly. In California, we actually happen to be the only state that has a consumer responsibility model where if you purchase a television or monitor in the state of California, you pay an additional tax. In other states, we're seeing consumer responsibility. And I believe that both of them can work if done correctly. Some states, unfortunately, haven't adopted any regulations, not even a landfill on. I'm sorry, a ban on landfilling electronics. And regardless of which of the models states go with, I believe that there should be some regulation in place.
Okay, certainly an area that needs more regulation. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Arman Sadeghi, founder and CEO of All Green Electronics Recycling.